The Supreme Court says Democrat Mark Martinez is eligible to run for Douglas County Sheriff. This overturns the decision last week from the Douglas County Election Commission, which sided with the challenge from the Douglas County Republican Party. The party argued Martinez didn't have an active law enforcement certification, and they say that made him ineligible to run under Nebraska state law. But his campaign said that law doesn't explicitly state that his credentials need to be active. And today, the state's highest court agreed, making him eligible to run. Well, the scope of Nebraska's